What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Counting Wisdom podcast. I wanted to talk about how long do we have left. Some of the signs of the times really show that we are getting closer and closer to that day. Now, whenever I think of, this question, obviously I can't know, or no one really knows exactly when Christ is going to return. But sometimes I always do question, especially because when Revelation talks about the things that must shortly take place, of course there are different views on the book of Revelation, in the Christian church. There are some that believe that, Revelation is symbolism, and others believe other things. But I hold to a kind of a pre-tribulation viewpoint. And, I think that we are getting closer to the end of the last days. That's just my personal opinion. I do think that, we look at the book of Revelation in a chronological way. That's how I have, really looked. And when I read the book of Revelation, it seems to me that it is chronological, and basically chapters 5 through the end is all future events. It really seems to me that none of this has happened already, or is in the past, or can't be taken literally. Now, I do think that, when we see Israel really back in the spotlight, that really speaks to me. Like, the Bible is right in our face these days. We always look at reading the Bible as a history book in a way, but also as a future prophecy book. But it's interesting that, the Bible is, being played out right in front of our eyes these days. And that's exciting news for the Christian church. I think that we have to keep our hope up. I don't think it's right to really scoff and say, hey, where's the promise of this coming? Everything is continuing as normal. I do think it's right for us to have these conversations and talk about how close we are to the coming of the Lord. And a lot of the members of the church are also saying the same thing, through all the studying that they're doing. We have many people, and I want to note pastors, which is kind of rare for a pastor sometimes to talk about the end times, but they are even saying that we are close to the coming of the Lord. And when I see all the struggle that is happening in the world, seemingly like just unrest and chaos, it seems to me that we're getting closer. But one of the things that I think points to a closer return of Christ is the technological advancement of the human race. People are trying to leave this place, and also finding how hard it is to leave Earth and set up a civilization on the moon or on Mars. And I don't think God is going to allow people to leave this earth, especially because the tribulation is a judgment on people. And if people aren't here to, get the wrath of God or discipline for, their behavior, then, I don't think that really aligns with the biblical message. I believe that, God is going to return soon, because we are getting closer to where, we can establish a base on the moon. Probably is more practical than Mars. But even Mars, we're getting so closer. We're getting so close to the time that, people can do those things. And I think that is a sign of the time. I just watched last night, a little documentary on getting to Mars, and we are getting closer, and technology is advancing. Look at what's happening in robots, look at what's happening in, the whole increase of knowledge. These are signs of the times, and where will we be in another 100 years? Obviously in 100 years, we'll all be in heaven anyway, because, we passed away. But, is the human race going to last another 100 years? Well, I don't know. Sometimes the signs of the times fizzle out, where we can say, oh wow, this has to be pointing to the return of the Lord. But then also sometimes they, ramp up, and it reminds us that, Christ is coming soon. But then there may be, a break in time, and a couple years pass, and, I know that when the Bible said there will be peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come on people. So is it possible that the world will sort of get to a peace and safety kind of way, where we've solved a lot of these problems, and now people are more relaxed, obviously still living in sin, but they're more relaxed, and they're like, hey, we have created a place here on this earth, and we're there. But yet they don't realize that the wrath of God is coming. So that's kind of a possibility too, when you think about it. Just, but at the same time, again, when I talk about the space race, I don't think we are 100 years away from establishing a base on the moon. I heard that there was already a company out there taking applications for a one-way ticket to Mars, to colonize Mars. Basically to get people, families out there to have babies and, start living on the planet Mars. And so I don't know if we're 100 years away, especially if AI is as great as they say it is, where, AI is able to speed up a lot of things that once took, days and months. Again, the whole Tower of Babel story is similar to a space race type of story, that people were trying to build a tower to heaven, and I believe it was, there's a lot to unpack in that story, but I believe it represents how, there are certain things that God, it's not necessarily a tower to heaven that God had a problem with, because, it was, but, it was also just people getting together, being one, and ignoring God, and, saying that, hey, we're going to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And that's one thing that God did not like. And so, again, I think the space race is a big sign that, obviously God's wrath can come in on the nation of, if there's a nation out on Mars or on the moon, because the book of Revelation talks about, destructive things happening in space too. But again, I doubt it. I just, sort of doubt that, God is going to let people start spreading out into space before his return. Because the book of Revelation really focuses on the earth and the problems that come to the earth. But again, a lot of this, can sometimes be speculation when trying to discern when Christ is going to return. Sometimes we are giving our best guess when talking about this because, we don't know, and again, we see the structuring of the one world government coming together, but at the same time, we're not necessarily right around the corner in a one world government. There's, it's not going to be established in just, let's say a week from now. It still takes time for those things to develop. I believe the mark of the beast has something to do with there being no jobs anymore. And I did a podcast on that where I was talking about how, I believe people take the mark of the beast because they got rid of jobs, and, the whole saying of a robot can take someone's job because a robot can do it better, or they can work nonstop. I believe, with the advancement of robots, they're going to replace a lot of jobs, if not all of them. And we get to a place where, there's already been talk of a, basically allowance going to people, a one world income, where we get paid by the government an allotment of money to do with, for our expenses. And so, there's huge problems. The Bible talks about when people aren't working, when people are just, lazy or they're not productive in their life, problems do arise from that. And the Bible talks about that. The first story that I think of is Jonah. When he went to Nineveh, one of the things that the description of the Ninevian people, the people of Nineveh, are, they were not working. They were kind of lazy, living unproductive lives. And so, that has some correlation to the sinfulness of man and how sinful people can get because they're not living productive lives. And so, if jobs get replaced and people just have all this leisure time, that is a perfect storm for sin to increase as well. And so, one of the things we have to do is really keep our eyes and ears open to, what is happening in the world. I think that, we have to really continue to chew on this topic, really think about it and I think if we get too over, think too concerned with this type of topic, though, we can start to change our life too early in order to say, oh, I'm waiting for the Lord, so I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to, start preparing physically. And that could be bad because maybe you're, draining your savings account or, taking extreme measures because you are doing something that you think, is going to save yourself. And, it is good to be prepared physically, but one of the things, I sort of came to a realization and somewhat is that, this tribulation can't really be survived. The only reason it's, even a hint of survivability is because Jesus said God will shorten the days. So the days will be shortened, which, again, I believe that means that, the days that are given in Revelation are not the exact length of the tribulation. I think it's a shortened to be an undetermined time that we don't know yet. But again, that's just, my thoughts. But anyway, when you start to take extreme measures and change your life because you think that, the tribulation is right around the corner, then that could possibly be, a bad move, especially if days go on and, the tribulation is still, years down the road. Because again, the Bible says they will say peace and safety, peace and security, but really it says peace and safety, meaning the world starts to, I think, take a turn for the better in their eyes, where, now, especially if there's no jobs, people are living in peace. They figure out food shortages and, prosperity. Then the Bible says sudden destruction comes. And so, that is a possibility. Now, again, a lot of this can be speculation because, of the reasons that I previously discussed, that, we don't know the day or the hour, and that's something to note. Jesus himself said there will be buying and selling, planting and building, marrying and giving in marriage, all the way up until he returns, which I believe is, reference to the rapture, not necessarily his second coming where he establishes the millennial kingdom, because I don't think that all that is going to be going on, especially in the level it does now in the tribulation. I think he's talking about the rapture. But, we already do live in exciting times where, we do see that we're getting closer to the Lord's return. And that is one thing that I believe we can say is a fact, even though we just don't know the timing. But, I know that when I look at maybe older videos of in the church, Christian material, it's so easy to talk yourself into a mindset that Christ is going to return, and you may be a little bit too early, because a lot of the people that I've seen make their videos. Some have passed away, and are already gone to heaven, so, in that way, like, the Left Behind, the Tim LaHaye that made Left Behind, he has already passed away. There's another guy, Jimmy DeYoung. He made some end times videos, and he has passed away already. There are different mindsets that we can see can arise. And I know personally as well that sometimes, I can start to think, based off of the content that I'm listening to or reading, I can start to think, this world event must point to, Christ is just a week or a month away, when it may not be the case, and I know there actually are people out there that are sending out misinformation. I remember back in 2020, 2019, 2021, when I was on YouTube, and they were like, oh, Israel's starting to build the third temple. And I saw a few videos like that where it was like, Israel is breaking ground and it'll be 3 days until they start building, or, it was like this video out there that they were, I think, maybe trying to prophesy or speak something into existence or something, whatever that means for them. But anyway, my whole point is that, time has gone by, and, Israel may be closer in some form of building the third temple, but it has not broke ground like the video suggested it would, and especially in the time frame that the video suggested it would. And so that same type of thing, I believe, is happening with the rapture concept too, is that you have people, who are really preaching from the standpoint of, oh, the rapture is in 2020, or the rapture is in 2021. And I believe there is a spirit that can come on us that gives us a sense of urgency, which I do believe, there is some sense of urgency to, come to faith in Christ. You don't want to wait. But, people can sort of go crazy sometimes in thinking about the timing of these things. And when you really think about it, as Christians, we should already be living ready. When you think about just what we should be doing, we should already be living in that readiness spiritually, mentality. But other than that, there's not really a whole long to-do list that we should be concerning ourselves with in regards to that, other than preaching the gospel and, getting people saved. But, again, my personal opinion is that the tribulation is not survivable. So I don't know if storing up 7 years of food, or, having a water source nearby is really going to do any good, both for Christians and non-Christians. The tribulation, I believe, is sort of like how movies call it an extinction level event. It is meant to bring about the end of days and usher in the millennial reign of Christ. And I don't think anything that a person prepares to do would really do them any good, I mean, just think about it. Even if you have nukes that blow up and you're in your bunker, and you survive that, you only have a certain amount of time left, because I hear, I'm not an expert on this, but even I hear that if there's a nuclear disaster, radiation stays around for, I heard it was, 7+ years or so, that the ground and the area is unsafe. And when you look at the Chernobyl disaster, that whole area is still unsafe, and for many years, it wasn't habitable. I don't know what it's like now, and I don't know the exact time for a nuke disaster, but let's say you're in your bunker and you stored up, a year, 2 year, 3 years worth of food. Well, you still can't come out of your bunker because, unless you have, hazmat suits in there. But if everything's destroyed, what is the person going to do? Because they can't eat food outside. They can't drink water. The water's contaminated. But even coming from the tribulation, not a nuclear disaster, but the tribulation, so the water gets contaminated. For first part is 1/3 of the water, and then all of the water is contaminated. That it turns to blood in the tribulation. And okay, let's say you've survived the 1/3 of water being contaminated. I mean, you just have to really think if it's in your region or not. God doesn't tell us what region of the earth is that 1/3. But let's say, for example, it's not in your part of the world. Eventually, all of the water in the world gets contaminated. And so, you would have to have a water source. You'd have to have years of water stored up, or a way of creating water, or collecting rainwater. You'd have to have that figured out. And then you'd have to have food enough to survive, especially if the plagues don't take out your sources of, besides the chaos and people killing each other, besides that, so the tribulation is just a extinction level event, and I believe the only way to really survive it is the rapture. I think the rapture is an essential thing, because everyone else that's left on the earth is set to die. And I believe that's what the Bible really says, is that, people are just dying in different ways, getting to the point where they enter into the judgment of God, and so, anyway, I think that's why I would study the rapture, and have more confidence in the rapture, because I'm just making the point. I don't know if, the tribulation is survivable or not. I know there's some pastors that say, there's people that survived the tribulation. But, I haven't read that in Scripture. you know. I know you can sometimes make the deduction that, they survive or there are survivors, but scripture doesn't actually say that, specifically that there is a group of people that survive. And so, you would have to be at the right place, at the right time. But, to say that, Christians throughout the whole world are just going to be, not affected by the tribulation events, I think that is a stretch. Considering that, if Noah didn't build his boat, he would have been affected by the flood. If Lot didn't get out of Sodom, he would have been destroyed too. And so Lot had to get out of the city. And I think that relates to the Christian church, that we have to get out of the whole entire world in order to not be affected by the tribulation events. And yeah, we're relying on God. And obviously, again, if the space race, someone lives on Mars or lives on the moon, yeah, I guess they could survive. I mean, there's people already in space now. When you think about the International Space Station, I sometimes wonder, if someone is living in the International Space Station, will they be able to survive, the tribulation events, But again, there's an asteroid that comes out of the space and hits the Earth. And so the space station would have to be able to dodge that asteroid that comes, because the stars start falling to the ground. And so some people believe that means a meteorite, that the meteors start falling to the ground. So that could take out the International Space Station right there. So anyway, there's so many unknowns when it comes to the tribulation for us as people, that, we'd really have to, rely on God to, help us survive that tribulation. Now, collectively, there is only one story that talks about a mass group of people surviving something. And that is the story of Moses freeing the children of Israel out of bondage. They collectively survived the plagues that came on Egypt, and also, just the edge of the sword. They survived that way. But again, that story shows collectively all the people of Israel being together in one place. There's not necessarily a story that relates to Christians throughout the whole entire world, surviving, other than the rapture of the church. Because you have Christians in Africa, you have Christians in Asia, Russia, you have Christians in South America, that spans the whole world. And, who's to say there's not a person walking, rightly in South America? Or who's to say there's not a person that's walking right with God in Africa or in Asia, and they're not, who's to say that there are someone walking worthy of God, worthy of the rapture in those areas, and so I believe the real answer is that there is a rapture of the church, and we can put our hope in God to rescue us. That's really the only thing that makes sense, when you have church members sort of suggesting that God's going to protect us. There's Christians scattered throughout the whole world. I don't see how God's going to protect us through the tribulation unless we all have a bunker somewhere, or we are, in space. But other than that, there's no guarantee other than the rapture guarantee that gives us that hope. And that's why we have hope, because we are not appointed to wrath. And God is not going to treat us like the wicked. Now, yeah, people can still get into car crashes and things like that. But as far as the tribulation, God treating us just like the same people in Sodom and Gomorrah, the Bible suggests that God does not do that, Now, there are isolated stories of things happening to Christians, but not a collective story. There's no story in the Bible that collectively teaches, that mass groups of Christians are affected by the wrath of God. We always somehow escape in some way. Even though, there were martyrs in the early church, suggested by history and what historians have told us, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that every single Christian, was eliminated, and only no, and that's not the case. Mass extinction of Christians, no. And so that's one of the reasons, among many reasons, why I believe there is a rapture of the church. Because God doesn't treat us the same as the wicked. Now, individually, crazy stuff sometimes happen, but we don't have 50 stories of the book of Job where every single time there's something happening and the magnitude like the book of Job. We don't have, 50 stories, of the same type of event, especially in the Bible. I'm not talking necessarily about what historians have said has happened or something like that. But anyway, thanks so much for listening. Hopefully this was helpful to someone. I do want to do another video talking about the truthfulness of the rapture, because you will have people come in the comments and like, oh, there's no rapture. And I don't know who those people are. I don't even know if they're Christians. They just, sometimes you have people pretending to be Christian commenting on a video, and we don't know who these people are who are saying that. And they post these long comments sometimes where they want you to read their whole comment, and it takes like 5 minutes to even read their comment. And so I would say, that's one of the reasons why I don't always allow comments on my videos, because you have misinformation out there that, is happening on these online platforms. And so, I don't know what's in their mindset in regards to how they plan on surviving the tribulation. It seems like many of the people who say there's no rapture and God's gonna, they don't have any plan. They don't have any plan of survivability. they're just kind of saying, oh, I'll think of something when I'm there type of thing. And, that's not practical. That's not reality. Obviously God does the supernatural, but, God still operates in some form of what we as people call, reality. It seems to me that sometimes what God does is that, certain things just don't happen, in certain times. And so we have to always operate in reality. I heard a story about somewhere in another country where this man went on a 40-day fast to be like Jesus, and he ended up dying. He lost his life because he was saying that he was operating out of faith to, do a 40-day fast to be like Jesus. And that's just another story to say that sometimes as Christians, we can be a little bit crazy in what we are thinking and doing or expecting that is not reality, But, of course, the Bible specifically talks about a rapture. And I know that person who says that, has not read the Bible, because, the rapture is in the Bible. It's a fact. And people who say there is no rapture, they have not really paid attention. And so, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you on the next one. See ya.